Welcome to the Art Against Mental Illness podcast. My name is Alex Lovelace and this is my podcast about the healing powers of art for artists, art lovers, the art curious and anyone with an interest in mental health and well-being. This is the first of what I'm calling my talking therapy sessions, where I interview someone about their experiences within creativity and mental health. I'm incredibly honoured to have a good friend of mine, Sharon Milton, who agreed to do an interview with me. I think you'll find that her story is not only incredibly interesting, but hugely inspiring as well. She conquered cancer, she conquered the army, she conquered the police, she conquered the Arctic, she conquered guns, and she conquered art. Her story is truly fascinating, so I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. Hopefully this will be the first of many interviews I do, so let's get on with it. Here's me and Sharon. I'm here with Sharon Milton. I've known Sharon for how long have we known each other?
About less than a year, actually.
Less than a year. We met when Sharon came to one of my art group meetings and revealed to me that she had some experience in project management. I immediately jumped on this because I had a bunch of exhibitions to arrange and I'm terrible at organising, so I thought that this would be really handy. She was very coy at the time about just how experienced she is, and I'll come back to that. Some point later, took the lead on arranging our big show for the Perthshire Open Studios event, which was 9 days of an exhibition in the glorious Octorada Picture House that saw hundreds of people come through the door and had a ridiculously well-attended champagne reception on the first evening. So that was all went like clockwork thanks to Sharon's history in doing this sort of thing. So I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to hand over to Sharon to introduce herself and we'll see how we get on. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. So by way of introduction, I would usually tell people that I'm a retiree who spends time doing art, and that's the short version. In my previous life, up until 2 years ago, I was a police officer, also a mother of 2 sons, and I live with my partner in Octorada. And it's only really been in the last 2 years since I retired that I've been able to immerse myself fully in art, focusing mainly on watercolours and latterly pastels. So I would like to call myself now and describe myself as an artist. My journey with art has really been threefold. Largely for the first 50 years of my life, it was about escapism from the pressures of teenage years, anxiety connected with home, whether that's issues with my parents or living in an unhappy marriage, escaping the pressures of work. I'll maybe come back to that shortly. And then 9 years ago I was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, and the art became very much a journey of rehabilitation and recovery for me. And since I've retired, I would say my art is best summarised as prehabilitation. It's something I do as a matter of routine. I enjoy it, and the focus for me now is on staying well.
So it'd be good to go back to the beginning a bit and drill down on some of those issues you raised. So if we go back to your childhood and when you first started art and how it helped you.
I mean, I think like many people, I went to school and art was something that was a bit of an add-on, filled an hour or two. I can't really remember the art classes I had at school, which is a bit disappointing because that was the only formal tuition I ever received. I did O grade art. I remember enjoying the classes because they were slightly easier than some of the more scientific subjects. But in terms of key moments for me, my parents separated when I was 13, which was quite a challenging time. And I do recall spending hours and hours on my art homework, which was quite unusual for me. And when I look back now, it's only on hindsight that I realise actually that was purely escapism for me. And I wouldn't have used these terms at the time, but a form of meditation as well, a means of coping. I did art until I was 16 and then went down a science path. The timetable clashed, so I couldn't take art into my 6th year, and I pretty much parked art until I was at university, and there was a lot going on at home. My mother was an alcoholic, and that brought with it a lot of turmoil and upset, and she slowly drank herself to death over about 3 years. And during that time I focused a lot on pencil drawing, and some of the pencil drawing I did, very, very detailed, took hours and hours and hours. And again, it's very clear to me now that that was about escapism. But other mediums, I didn't explore any other form of art other than pencil drawing because it was easy. HB pencil, 2B pencil and a sheet of paper, fairly easy to do art wherever I was. And then roll the clock forward, I graduated from university, I joined the police and loved it. I was in an environment where I fitted in. I, at the risk of sounding arrogant, was a good police officer, a successful police officer. And although I was good for the police, it was only later that I realised the police wasn't necessarily good for me. So the pressures and the stress, although it was exhilarating, thrilling, fantastic challenges, great people, it did take its toll in terms of stress.
Where were you at the time when you joined the police?
I joined the police after graduating from Aberdeen University, and my mother died just before I graduated, and I took the decision to join Avon and Somerset Police in Bristol to be near my brother and sister. And about a year after joining the police in Avon and Somerset, my ego had to accept that my brother and sister would cope fine without me, and actually I saw less of them when I lived 40 miles away than I did when I lived in Aberdeen. So love and my interests in outdoor pursuits brought me north again, and in 1997 I transferred into Grampian Police and then spent 25 years pursuing a really exciting career in the police.
So before we get into the police bit, you were living on a farm?
I married a farmer and lived on a farm, and obviously brought my 2 sons up. Alongside that, had a very challenging job, so it took a bit of juggling. But yes, lived on a farm in the back of Beyond up in Aberdeenshire. Yeah,
they say that running a farm is like more than a full-time job. You were juggling 2 more than full-time jobs, and so did you find any time there for art, and did that influence the experience of working on a farm, influence that side of you at all?
Not at all. I mean, I was fortunate that my husband at the time and his parents ran the farm, so I had nothing to do with it. I kept it fairly much at arm's length, but had 2 young children as well, and a very demanding job that was taken up at least 60, sometimes 70 hours a week plus commuting.
You had quite a trajectory from the beginning of your career. I guess you were a street bobby at some point. You were in the police force for 25 years. Does it feel like that was a fast progression, or is it just something you did over time, just worked your way up?
So my progression in the police was quite unusual for police officers in that my first promotions came really fast, and then over time they slowed down. So the further through the police I went, the longer it took to get promoted, which is not how things usually happen. Ordinarily, someone does 10 years, they get promoted to sergeant, do another 6 or 7, get promoted to inspector, and it gets quicker. For me, I did 4 years, got promoted to sergeant, 3 years, got promoted to inspector, and then every rank after that was 6 or sort of 7 years. So it didn't feel rapid, but against the sort of usual milestones, it was.
So do you want to give us the highlights then of the big things that happened up until you retired?
Okay, so I joined Avon and Somerset Police in 94, transferred to Grampian in 97, worked my way through a number of ranks, so everyone starts at the bottom: PC, sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, superintendent, and in 2015 15, I got promoted to chief superintendent, which is where I spent sort of the last 7 years of my career. I'll come back to that because that was absolutely the highlight of my career. I just loved it. It was brilliant. And then 2015 was just a really pivotal year for me in every way. So December 2015, I got my promotion to chief superintendent. I was put in charge of a department that deals with emergency events and resilience planning across Scotland, with a team obviously spread right across Scotland. And 3 weeks later, I got a cancer diagnosis, stage 3 breast cancer. So literally I'd just started the job, hadn't even got my feet under the table, and I'd take a year off work. And that's probably where my proper, if you like, journey with art started again. So I'd had maybe 20 years where I'd not picked up a pencil, I'd not done, it wasn't quite 20 years, say 15 years where I'd not picked up a pencil, picked up a brush, but I found myself facing a situation where I didn't know if I was going to live, and I don't say that lightly, and receiving treatment that required me to stay away from people, and the art was something that I threw myself into. That was quite a challenging year, as you can imagine. Fortunately, I'm here to tell the tale and recovered. When I went back to work a year later, I was very much a changed person. Ultimately, my marriage didn't survive the cancer diagnosis either. But when I went back to work, had a real thirst for life, a real enjoyment of the role. And probably the absolute highlight for me in my police career was the 7 years that I spent as a divisional commander in charge of the events, emergency and resilience planning. So highlights for me were leading on the protective security for the climate conference, COP26 in November 21.
That was in Glasgow?
Yeah, in Glasgow, responsible for the protective security of 128 world leaders and 9 members of the royal family. Just amazing, absolutely amazing. I led the planning and supported the delivery of the policing arrangements in Scotland for the Queen's funeral. And I wrote the police strategy, which was subsequently adopted across the UK for the response to the COVID pandemic. So those were probably the three main highlights in the latter.
Yeah, nothing big there. What a boring life you've led, and you've met some world leaders.
I have. So I've still got the screensaver. It's number 1 photo on my phone of myself and Barack Obama. I was invited to Cameron House during the climate change conference because he wanted to thank me and my team for the efforts that we'd put in. So that was absolutely a highlight. Could only have been improved if his wife had been there, because I would have liked to have met Michelle too, but no, amazing.
Life's full of disappointments, eh? Is that anyone else you met?
There's a few people that I've met and plenty of people that I've spoken to on the phone, but I've probably got to wait another 25 years before I can disclose any of the details. Oh,
okay. Any names you can give us?
Well, I mean, when you're responsible for the security of 128 world leaders and an event, things do get interesting. And policing is meant to be as far removed from politics as it's possible to be, but that certainly proved a little bit challenging.
It's staying tight-lipped on some of the characters. I know about some of them, and they're very interesting humans, I can tell you that. Let's bring this back to the art. How did you find time to do anything after your cancer diagnosis? Obviously going back to work and having like a seriously important job, were you able to find time?
No is the answer. So I could go a whole year where I didn't pick up a paintbrush, but conversely there would be some days that I'd come home from work and before I even took my coat off I'd painted the same pictures 20 times, and I now realise it was just absolutely about coping and stress relief, and it was about the process rather than the outcome. Again, I mentioned escapism earlier. During cancer, My painting was very detailed. I did a lot of botanical painting, produced calendars, sold prints for charity. It was very focused work, and it was absolutely about generating a product that I was proud of. I spent hours and hours working on that, but when I went back to work, as I said, I'd get home from work some days and, be cooking tea with one hand and painting version 6 of a picture with another hand, and watercolours lent itself to that. But literally during the year around about the climate change conference, I did not do any art at all, partly because I didn't have a day off. But I realise now, looking back, that actually my sense of well-being and my mental health would have been enhanced had I found the time to do that.
And so you retired?
Yeah.
As you do. Quite early?
Yeah, I took early retirement. I had 28 years service. Normally the police retire after 30 years service. But I had promised myself and my partner that if I lived to 50, then I would retire at 50. And I stretched it out to 51 because the excitement and the prospect of leading the climate change conference, and then latterly I came out of retirement to deliver the Queen's funeral, was just too exciting an opportunity to miss. But at 51, I did the decent thing and I retired. And I promised myself when I retired that I wouldn't look for a job for a year. I'd give myself a year off. And here I am 2.5 years later and I've still not got a job. And I've managed to get bored once, so I turned the TV on. But otherwise, I'm feeling well, healthy, happy, and just managing to eke out as much time to be creative as I would ever want. And it's great.
Do you miss it, the job?
No, I've got so many highlights that I can reminisce about and still get a buzz when I think about. And in fact, some of it is so bizarre that when I think about it now, it's like, did that actually really happen? And I'm sure in years to come, if I have the gift of grandchildren, when I'm retelling the tales, they'll think I've made them up. But no, I don't miss it. I think the stress levels and the pace was quite exceptional, actually.
So, so if they beckoned you back out of retirement again, you're not going to say yes? Joking aside, I don't think they would ever do that. I was very difficult to manage. I think I know I was good at my job. And again, that does sound arrogant. I know I was good for policing. Policing wasn't good for me. The environment, I didn't thrive in that environment. But I've heard from pretty much every manager I ever had that was really challenging to manage. So I don't think there's ever a prospect of me being asked back. It's always good to have someone around the place that's going to cause a bit of trouble and shake things up. And of course, we're sort of sidestepping the fact that you're not male, as everyone might have noticed, and the police is a very male institution in this country, but I suspect everywhere. How did you find that side of things?
Yeah, for me, it was part of the challenge, and for many years it was quite exciting. By the time I left, 28 years into my service, it started to actually get a little bit tedious. For the first 20 odd years, it was quite exciting being the pioneer and the first woman to do this and the first woman to do that, and the first divisional commander, the first firearms commander, the first, public order commander. And I was quite proud of that. But in 2022, you would sort of hope the environment that you're in might have changed. And unfortunately for most people, it hadn't. So frustrating, proud of what I had achieved. I tried to create an environment for other women to thrive in as well. And I'm quite proud of what I did in that regard. But no, I'd had enough by the time I retired.
Yeah, I can imagine. And firearms commander?
Oh, yeah.
You shoot guns?
Yeah, so the firearms commander is about authorising the deployment of police officers with firearms. Obviously, for the climate change conference, it was a large part of the event in terms of armed close protection and just great.
Did you hold a gun? And have you shot a gun?
So I did, but not in the police. So I've been I spent time in the Territorial Army. So my role in the police was much more about sitting in an office and doing the checks and balances and authorising other people to carry guns. Yeah, it was quite high pressure, I have to say, you know, when you're dealing with matters of split-second decisions as to whether police officers with guns can, you know, apprehend someone or go into their home, or you can imagine.
I can honestly do a whole episode just talking about that. That's really, really interesting. But we won't, because this is an art podcast. I've got one more thing I want to cover in case we forget, is your skiing thing.
So when I was diagnosed with cancer, and I had 6 weeks where I was waiting for various tests that were going to tell me whether it was something that they could treat or cure. So it was basically the 6 weeks of waiting to hear how far it had spread and whether it was terminal. A friend of mine, in an effort to encourage me and keep me optimistic, suggested we sign up to an Arctic marathon in Sweden on cross-country skis. And the truth is, I thought, well, I might be dead. There's no harm signing up to this. So I signed up to it, put the word out, started painting pictures, and what happened is people started buying the pictures and prints and cards as a form of sponsorship. So 2 years later, when I was almost finished the treatment, I found myself in Sweden having raised, well, between me and my friend, £22,000 for the charity Walk the Walk, doing an Arctic marathon in, I think the coldest it got was -36, which was pretty cold. 5 days in Sweden, and so that was the Arctic Marathon.
What a dull life you've led. Okay, so let's bring this back to the art. Who are you as an artist at the moment?
Well, it feels like a really exciting time for me, because I spent 20 odd years just doing watercolours, and when I retired I treated myself and I went on a 5-day art course, which is the first time I've had any tuition other than YouTube, which I don't think you can understate the value of YouTube. But I went on an art course last year, and wow, it was amazing, absolutely amazing. So where I am now is experimenting with pastels, working towards oils. And I only say working towards oils because it's about finding the space and acclimatising my partner to the amount of mess and all the horrific smells that oil paints are going to generate in the house. But my inspiration at the moment is Scottish skies. And we are really blessed living here, just amazing. And I feel blessed because I'm not actually the one that goes out and takes the photograph of the skies. I've joined a number of Facebook pages about Scottish scenery, Highland scenery, we love beaches, and I'm on them every day, and there's just some amazing, amazing photographs, which I save, obviously contact the people that have generated them, ask for their permission. But I must have about 200 photos that I'm currently working my way through, so not short of inspiration. It's primarily, at the moment, pastels, which is completely new to me. Love the vibrant colours, and just so enjoy seeing a picture come together.
We exhibited together earlier this year. You had your wall of locks.
Yeah.
Tell us about those.
Yeah, so it was a set of, well, ultimately I painted 19 rusty locks.
But by locks we mean the things that...
Not locks, as in Scottish locks, but the things that are on doors, like hinges.
Yeah.
And I painted one, which was from a photograph that somebody had posted. And I really enjoyed the detail and the colours and the textures. It was watercolour. So I started on an adventure of wandering the streets, taking photographs of people's rusty sheds and gates, and ended up painting 19 rusty locks. And I exhibited 14 of those as a set. Yeah, actually I was quite proud of that. And It was a journey that just sort of progressed and evolved. When I did number 1, I didn't plan to paint 19.
Yeah, I mean, they're amazing. I really loved them, and so vibrant in colour. People sort of see decay like that and they think of it's almost dull, right? And that here's something that should be thrown away, tear that door, that gate down and send it to the dump. And what you saw in that was beauty and vibrancy and colour. And what do you think drew you to that?
Well, I think exactly just what you said, looking at rust and the colours and the textures alongside shiny metal and alongside wood and, just every single colour that you could conceive was in a picture. And alongside the happy accidents that you often get with watercolour painting, you're not quite sure what the paint's going to do and where it's going to go. There was the requirement for some precision and detail. So it just was very different from my usual style. My usual style is quite often loose washes, but it just ticked the box for me in terms of what my brain and my soul needed at that time.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And you talk about, this tension between sort of looseness of watercolour and precision and detail. And do you find that you sort of need that to help you sort of focus in and find that flow?
Well, I didn't until I retired. So before I retired, my work was very loose and very quick. It'd be, right, I've got 45 minutes in between some report I'm reading that I'm just going to put colour wet in wet on a paper and see what it does. It was just about expression. When I retired, because I didn't have as much mental stimulation, I've found that my work's become more focused and more detailed.
So let's talk about art and mental health. And obviously, you seem in very good mental health at the moment. You've had some huge challenges, both positive and negative. And so what role do you think that art has played in getting you to where you are today, i.e. still here?
Yeah, so for me, I think art's taken 3 forms. To summarise, escapism, what I would term as rehab and recovery, and lastly, prehab. So the escapism, for many, many years, whether it was dealing with my parents' separation, my mother's alcoholism, a bit of stress in work, being in a very controlling and unhappy marriage, art was a form of escaping from that.
How does that manifest? Are you really not thinking about anything, or is it that it calms your thoughts down? Or
it would certainly calm my thoughts down, but when I'm in that zone, frequently it would be painting the same picture again and again and again. And I thought it was about, striving for perfectionism, but when I look back now, it wasn't about that at all. It was about needing the process, the therapy of this repetitive process, almost like a mantra, and how people meditate and calm down. Actually, the art was like that for me. But I would go years where I didn't do it, and then I would be compulsive over 3 days where the world would pass me by as I was so immersed in the art. So that was the escapism kind of art for me, and that was largely what art provided for certainly the first 45 years of my life. The next stage is what I'll loosely term rehab. So it's during the cancer, rehab recovery, and it was about capturing the beauty in the world. And I was looking at the world through a very different lens when I was living with cancer, in terms of, every sunset was like looking at the last sunset, every daffodil was like the only daffodil in the whole world. So it gave me a perspective where I really saw beauty in absolutely everything, which was quite poignant. And for me, that period of my art was about capturing it in absolute detail and with precision, that beauty. And it felt very spiritual, actually. So the sort of rehab recovery is more about where I was in my life at the time, but the trying as an artist to capture probably the realism, but also the mood. And that's more so, I suppose, in watercolour washes that are quite loose.
So you sort of touched on meditation, and I think meditation and mindfulness are sort of two sides of the same coin. And from your description there, it sounds like your observation of the world in terms of creating artworks was a form of mindfulness.
Yeah. I mean, I've done, the various courses in mindfulness and meditation, actually, the regimes that I follow, but there is absolutely a similarity, of that, sitting down and looking at a leaf for half an hour and really observing it.
Yeah.
And really seeing the colours and realising actually it's not just green. And for me, it was a bit of an epiphany.
Do you consider yourself a spiritual person?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm religious. I don't follow any religion. What I do find, and you mentioned earlier about getting into the zone or the flow, I think is the term you used. For me, when I'm in the flow with my art, I do feel like I'm being touched by something spiritual.
Amazing. And so do you think that experience, your cancer diagnosis, sort of toned the volume up on the world to number 11, thinking every day could be your last or among your last, has that stayed with you all the way through?
I try to hold on to it because I think it's important, but I would be lying if I said I remember that every single day. Most of the time I think I do. I take the dog for a walk and I see the beauty around me and I consider myself blessed, and I try to approach every day like it's the last, because I think it's a good philosophy and it makes me appreciate people and things, gives me gratitude, but I don't always manage it.
Yes, life keeps getting in the way of being calm and mindful. I guess this being a podcast partially about mental health or mental illness, and there's an element, particularly in my life, is using art to help in exactly as you say, recovery, rehab. If this is of any use to people, it should be for preventing relapse.
And that's the really important bit for me. This is stage 3 and I term it prehabilitation. Many stories of people like myself, use art to escape the realities of life, use art as a means of therapy to recover or to treat illness. I'm in the zone at the moment where I'm focused on the prehab. Let's do things to keep myself well.
Yeah.
So rather than, for many years, art was the thing I went to at point of crisis, now it's the thing that I try to do every day as part of my daily routine. It might just be 5 minutes of, shifting one pastel across a paper and then I put it down for the next day. But it's looking at it as part of a prehab program rather than a rehab program.
And how do you think that works? Why do you think that works?
Well, I think for me, it's having the discipline and the opportunity now, because I'm not working, but carving out the time. What also helps is having a space. Doesn't need to be a whole room, might just be the end of the kitchen table where things are there and to hand, that if I just suddenly get the urge, even if it's only 2 minutes, that I can express myself through art without requiring half an hour of setting stuff up and half an hour of clearing things away.
And so what is your studio's next door to where we are now? We're in the kitchen. So is that a dedicated studio?
No, and interestingly, it started off a gym.
Oh, okay.
And for 5 years it was a gym, and I think I went in there twice. So I decided, actually, let's get rid of the gym equipment and put some art stuff in there, and chances are I'll go in there more than twice. So it's not a dedicated studio, but we're gradually getting there.
Yes, indeed. You're moving in. Obviously, I think you and me are the same, is that I would do my art whether anyone saw it or not. But I keep accumulating artworks, and I have to get rid of them to clear space, and B, I think people like them, and I could really do with selling more, but I do sell the odd one, and the money is very appreciated given I'm currently unemployed. We've exhibited together. You have much history in exhibiting your work, and what do you get out of it?
Good question. The first exhibition I did was with you, and the last exhibition I did was with you. So I haven't done much exhibiting. I do use Facebook as a medium, mainly because you get pretty instant feedback as to whether someone likes things or not. So it gives me a sense, but I don't always paint what's popular. I think that's, really important. I paint what I need to paint. I try to avoid commissions. I've done quite a few now, probably over the years, about 20 or 30. But I find it quite stressful. What I try to do is paint a picture, and if someone else likes it and wants to buy it, that's great. And that's sort of the zone that I'm trying to preserve. But I will paint the occasional picture for friends that ask me.
And what do you get out of that?
Well, a couple of things. What I have done for years, because I was in employment and I didn't want to start having to fill out tax returns, any pictures I sold, I would give the money to charity. So I got a great sense of, self-gratification, and just felt good to do stuff for a good cause. So that was quite positive. But aside from that kind of altruistic side, there's definitely something about ego. My ego loves it when someone wants to put one of my pictures up on their wall. So it's not all about giving for others. There is definitely that bit about seeing a finished work and knowing that someone values it and appreciates it and wants to look at it every day is just amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And what does your partner think about it?
So she's not very arty, which is quite good, so we don't sort of compete with each other in any way. And occasionally when I paint a picture, she'll tell me I'm not selling it because it's going on the wall. So that was quite good feedback as well. Yeah, she just gives me my space to do what I need to do, and periodically will tell me she likes a picture. She's never yet once said, oh, actually, I don't like that, which is quite kind, because there's many pictures I paint that do end up in the bin. Yeah. But she's not the one that tells me to put them in the bin. So, no, supportive is probably the best way.
It's interesting, really, because our actual trajectories are quite similar. We started young, disappeared for a couple of decades, then took it back up again as a form of therapy and so on. And our perspectives are quite similar. So it's really, really interesting to hear. Do you have anything else you want to say to the listeners?
A lot of people say, oh, well, I just don't get the inspiration and I'm waiting for my muse, and I think you've got to start somewhere. So just pick up a pencil and see where it goes, rather than wait for, some divine hand to come down and strike you with inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, the inspiration comes after the perspiration, and then before it, and then after it, and then before it. It's just a process, right? And I think a lot of people miss the fact that it's not about this nice picture that you've made. That's a happy accident almost that comes at the end of a process that is the bit that we really value. And yeah. I think you've just got to get going. You've just got to do something. It might not be something you end up doing or want to do, but anyone can, what I mean?
And so I think that would be the summary for me. Art isn't about the outcome, it's about the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And if this podcast is about anything, that's exactly it. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you for your time. I'll let you get back into your studio and paint some more Scottish skies. Maybe I'll have you back on again at some point. But in the meantime, thanks for joining me.